So without further ado then, over to you, Alana, and we're looking forward to listening to your leadership journey.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Good afternoon. I hope you are and have been enjoying everything that you've been doing today. I am going to I've given my disclaimer that if you hear or see any tiny hands coming along, it's because I'm in school on an afternoon clubs day. But I just wanted to talk to you a bit today about what we should be doing in leadership and what we can be doing in leadership. There's a lot to be said about the type of leader everyone wants to evolve into. We all have this fantastic idea about what an ideal leader would look like. But many times we don't consider, well, what is my relationship with that image? How am I positioning that image? Where have I gained that image from? And I think a large part of what I have done and who I have become in terms of leadership stems from that. So if I were to start thinking about where I am right now, currently I am a head teacher of Vita at PAX Preparatory School. And I can honestly say at no point did I think I'd be in the independent sector. At no point did I think I'd be in a primary school or in an 11 plus setting. But those are things that happen along the journey when you start to decide that of what kind of leader you want to be and how you want that to evolve. Along the way, I co-founded the BAME Ed Network, which looks at how we can change the image and the ideologies we have in education and how we can make it far more inclusive so that when we say we have an education that is for all, we actually mean an education that everyone can be a part of and everyone can access. But I suppose the best part and the best way to think about it and to know about it would be to chart a part of my journey. So from my lovely accent, you can probably realize that I'm not British born. I was born in a lovely island of Trinidad. And being born on that island, there were changes from the start. When I first started at primary school, I started early. I was teaching in an all boys primary school. So that was my first primary school. Didn't go to an all girls primary school. It was myself, my sister, and all the boys. So I attended this all boys primary school, and every time it used to be like, oh, there's a girl. Why is there a girl in the middle of the all boys primary school? And that has helped to shape my understanding of being different and what it means to be different, but to be in an accepted space. Because those boys didn't really care. They allowed me to play football. I joined in with cricket. I joined in with the studies. We had competition, and it was all set on an equal footing. Because at that age and stage, for them, it didn't really matter. And their understanding and my understanding of living in an environment where you are someone who is the exception to the rule was shaped and formed through that experience. Fast forward to my secondary school, and I went to an all girls secondary school, and you can see very much the difference that there is. A lovely Catholic upbringing I had, so I'm very much formed within the religion, and the way that religion on faith also shapes the education that you get. But moving from one single gender setting to another, and in that brought another level of fascination. Now, post that, I then went to the University of the West Indies, and that will become apparent, and parts of that and how that has shaped my journey will also become apparent when we start considering, well, what does a leader look like? I went to UE and I studied chemistry and management studies. And then I decided to move to the UK. Now let's think about that for a second. I moved to the UK. And in doing that, I went through a huge cultural shift and a huge change in my cultural experience. For one thing, it was the first time that I ever had to consider that I was told that I was Black. Now, being from Trinidad, I am, to my core, Caribbean and West Indian. Those were the two parts that would really reference. I come to the UK and suddenly I have this racialization that is ascribed onto me. And I had to learn to deal with it. And when I say deal with it, it is because within my own self and within the environment from which I come, Black is something that is ascribed to Africanism. And our ideology and understanding of Africanism within the Caribbean will range from, yes, these are the people who are our ancestors, to, ooh, these are the people who we see on TV who don't really take good care of their children and are always asking for charity and aid. So I had to work throughout that entire determinism in order to understand who I was, what was my positioning in this new environment, and how could I work to be accepted. And that shaped a large proportion of my early career because I kept thinking, what can I do to be accepted? What can I do better? As a matter of fact, no matter what happened and whatever pushback I had, the one thing I was always thinking is, I will work harder. So I refer to that as my boxer moment. I put my head down. I knew I had to learn about a new education system. I knew I had to learn about a new curriculum. I knew I had to deliver on that curriculum and deliver really well in order to be noticed. So I put my head down and I started working really hard. And when things didn't work out, I would just work even harder. And that has shaped how I now look at work-life balance and how I look at, well, what are the opportunities that are being put forward for others? Because I will say this, when we think about education and what we ask of our teachers and the people who are going to evolve into our leaders, we ask them to fit the culture. And fundamentally now, I understand that that is wrong. Because why should I have to hide my authentic self in order for me to have recognition? Why should I have to hide my authentic self in order to be a leader that you have created and not the one that I am? And I'm saying that now, but at the time, the pressure to fit into society and the pressure to fit into a mold of what a leader looks like was intense. It was consistent. So no matter what school I went to, it would always be like, present this way, wear this clothing, behave in this manner, and that's who you need to be, that person over there. But the difficulty with being that person over there comes from the fact that I'm not that person over there. I will never be that person over there. And they don't have my cultural ideas and they don't share in those ideas that I have. They don't share in my values and my vision. So how can I aspire and work to be like them? Why should I go to work every day wearing a mask and not be allowed to be my authentic self? Now, I want us to stop there and have a moment and think, because this is a topic that is widely written about. You can read all the works of Professor Paul Miller. You can read every report that comes out around education, and you will hear exactly the same thing. That the people who are part of the pipeline in education, who are racialized as Black, Asian, or minority ethnic, those people are less likely to progress into leadership routes. And why is that? Well, firstly, we have to consider that we have a false idea of meritocracy, where we don't look at starts, we don't look at the people that we have in front of us, we don't look at backgrounds, we don't look at experiences. We just look specifically at, well, what are the talents that I want? And I want them to come in ready-made. What am I thinking that this school needs? And am I thinking, ooh, we need a man in this position because it requires these stereotypical services to occur? Or am I thinking, I wonder who can take this role and shape it into something that I didn't even consider? Because we're very averse to risk in education. We're being trained to be that way. We don't want to take the chance that someone might do something so radical or present an idea that will help education in the future, but not help the right now. We don't want to present someone to our school body that possibly would say, oh, I'm not sure if they look like my students. I'm not sure if they will act like my students. I'm not sure if they're the role model in exactly the same way that I want them to be. What is their cultural background and does it fit with the region where we are? But then we're also the group of people who will turn around and say, oh, we're not preparing our students for who they are today and for what they're experiencing today. We're preparing them to be global citizens. Well, how are we preparing our leaders? How are we accepting our leaders as global citizens? And those are some of the barriers and challenges that I've faced along the way in my journey. It's not been all bad, but it's definitely not been all good. There have been elements where I've thought about the barriers I face, and it's all the things that you will see reported in every single report in education. Being able to get the recognition that is deserved, being able to be noticed for the work that you're doing, being able to take all of the groups that everyone else doesn't want to teach and teaching them in a transformative way, and therefore being left with higher challenge groups and higher challenge targets. In short, it comes back to that old adage that we hold. You have to be twice as good in order to get half as much. And my journey wasn't any different to that. As a matter of fact, it fit this stereotype. But what changes my philosophy now, and what changes my attitude, and how that has allowed me to grow, is what I want to share with you today. I want to share with you the ideas that you should be taking with yourself on this leadership journey, the ideas and the thoughts and the management skills and talents that you should be harnessing within your schools. When we think about leadership, you have to be courageous. And my call to action for all of you is to be courageous and to make the changes that are necessary for us to grow a global citizen in a globally recognized school. So we need to clarify what the issues are, confront them, and make change happen. And those two steps are the hardest, because we always believe that as leaders and as people who are working towards leadership, we will always be on the face of change. But the reality is, when change is actually facing you, it is difficult to stare it in the eye and make something happen. 9 out of 10 times, we will feel like we must back down. We lose our courage and we start to make excuses about the lack of support that we feel and the lack of support that is present. And when we make those changes, we need to commit to them and make sure that they're long-term, so that what happens and the positive outcomes don't disappear when we decide that we're moving on to another place. How do we ensure the continuation? Well, to do that, I would say you first have to look at self. And that is something that we don't do quite often as leaders. We don't examine ourselves. Just today, I was speaking to our students about mindfulness and how the last thing you should do every night after you've read your book is put the book to the side and take 5 minutes to just think and listen to yourself think. So we practiced that in assembly today. We had a conversation with ourselves in our heads, and we listened to ourselves think about the situations that we've experienced, the worries that we have, and what are the things that we can compress into the really small worries and keep to ourselves. And what are the things that we don't find that we're able to compress or we can't find the way out of, and that we need to go and hand to someone else to help us untangle. When you think about the key junctions in your life as a leader, and we all have them, we need to pick apart how those key moments have shaped us in the terms of the values and the visions that we then have, and how we view leadership in itself. So when I think about the moment when I was made redundant, I walked into school that day, and it was just before the Easter holiday, around this time. No, a little later, around the Easter holiday. Walked into a SLT meeting, and then the governing body came down and they announced, we're making all of SLT redundant. We have a new head teacher. You can reapply for your job. Now, having been through that experience and the manner that that occurred broke me. And I think having the moment to understand how much it broke me, because I had my head down, I was working really hard, I was making change happen, I was doing everything that was expected of me as a leader, and I was just trying to be the ideal leadership model that is plastered up on the wall. And I couldn't understand why I still ended up in this position. Now, being a part of that key junction and having gone through that experience has taught me how I want others to be treated at a point when a school is in decline, or a point when I am going to make a big change into their lives, because I hold that power. It's allowed me to understand what it feels like to be on the other side when someone else holds your career in their hands, when someone else holds power over you. And it helped me to be a better leader now because I hold power over everyone within my school. And I use that power to ensure that their emotional well being is well catered for. But I needed to think through that moment. I needed to think through that experience. And I need to be clear on how that has helped to shape me into the leader where I am today. Because I needed to acknowledge the things that happened within that experience. I needed to acknowledge the emotions of leadership. And it's the same. When I think about the development of BayMed and how we've been able to move from a fledgling idea put together on Twitter in a conversation between two people that has now become a national network that helps to lead any leader, any school, any organization that wants to drive change so that education is more reflective of the diversity of the UK in terms of their curriculum, in terms of their team, in terms of anything that they're doing and presenting to their community. From a small idea, I can celebrate the ideas of leadership. But where did that idea come from? Well, it came from a conversation that occurred where I said to someone, well, I don't have much chance of becoming a head teacher. Look at the statistics. If you look at the workforce census, I am Black, Caribbean, female, not likely to go into headship. What has happened instead? I decided I was going to help others grow and flourish. I was going to find a way to help others not go through the experiences I had. Or if they are going through those experiences, they would have someone to count on. A stranger. Someone who is willing to sacrifice some time and leave for them. And through that, we were able to grow a network that has flourished. So always acknowledge and have that 5 minutes, 10 minutes for some of us, at the end of the day where you have that conversation with yourself. Think of the leadership issues you faced and think of how you have responded to them and the emotions that they allowed to build up within you. Because it is only by having a true sense of your own identity and what is shaping your identity on a daily basis and what is shaping your response emotionally, intellectually. It is only by having good acknowledgement of self that you will be able to be an authentic leader whose vision and values will show in every single thing that you do. Because you'll be really clear on why you're doing it. And you'll be really clear on the choices you make and the choices and opportunities you choose to pass on, because they will all feed into those experiences that you have had. Now, when I spoke about having that moment where I was made redundant, etc., I can then look at all of the recruitment experiences I went through. And that helps to shape how I do recruitment now. I look at how the schools presented themselves. That shapes how my own school is presenting itself and what we're working towards. I can even look at how I thought about education. And I realized that that's what's moved me from coming to the UK and being a part of the secondary sector and feeling confident enough to move into primary practice. And then saying, well, if I can change once, I can change again. And moving now into the independent sector and having a really strong sense of how education is shaped across various sectors. So once you've looked at yourself, and I'm going to say that is probably the most important and fundamental part of what you need to do in order to develop yourself. Once you've spent that time, you've looked at yourself, the good and the bad, you figured out what you really need to do well or what you currently do well, what you need to be working on, and who you surround yourself with, you're able to then clarify on the next part of your leadership and how it needs to develop. Because before you're a leader, success is about growing yourself. What's the next course I need to do? Should I do my NPQA? Should I do my NPQSL? Should I be doing a master's? What are the things that are really interesting me? What are the experiences I haven't had? Ooh, can I ask for a pastoral responsibility because I've done mostly academic? You spend a lot of time and you invest in yourself. And you spend a lot of time and you invest in understanding yourself. But when you become a leader, success is about growing others. I always think of leadership as being the person who is the gardener. Now, I should point out, my house is where plants come to die. However, it does mean that I have a very good sense of where my strengths lie and where my limitations are. So if you came to my house, you would find a selection of cacti and orchids, because those are the things that I'm most talented at. But that means I surround myself with people who are able to grow lots of other things. And together, we make a really strong senior leadership team. But that only comes from me knowing my limitations and me understanding that my purpose now in leadership is not to say, oh, well, I am going to be the master of everything. It's more about acknowledging, I'm not really good at this. Can you tell me how it should be done? Show me how it should be done. And you become a leader by becoming a learner. And we encourage others to grow by maintaining that humility. I have never been in a primary environment before. I moved into the primary environment and I could not get the children to line up at lunchtime. For the life of me, it was like herding cats. When you get one in the line, the other one walks off because they've forgotten something. And then QT was walking by and I said to them, can you help me line these children up because I am about to lose my patience? And she came in and she started singing a song. And all the children listened, they all stood up and they all lined up beautifully. Now, I had a moment of amazement where I said, oh, so all I need to do is actually be Mary Poppins and do a bit of singing. But it was much more than that. It was recognizing the routines that that teacher had established and recognizing where her strengths lay and how I was utilizing that in order to achieve an outcome. Now, that's a minor case. Let's put that onto a wider scale. In our schools, there are lots and lots of people. How do we know which ones are growing? How do we ensure that they're all growing healthily? And how do we ensure that the parts that aren't particularly healthy are pruned to effectively save the rest of the plant? That's the hard decision of leadership. And that's why I say, when you're a leader, you are a gardener, because you're always looking for which part needs the support and making sure that the support is ready and present when it is necessary. You're looking for where's really flourishing, and therefore you're making sure that there is enough room to flourish, whether you need to change the pots, whether you need to put it into a far more open space so that it can continue to flourish. And you're also looking for the parts where it's not quite working and seeing how you could prune those elements so that you can make that a focused part of maintaining the health of all of the plants and all of your garden. But the next part about gardening is there is no point to gardening if there's no biodiversity. And in ensuring biodiversity, we need to ensure that in the landscape of the schools where we're growing and we want everyone to flourish, and we're making sure that there is the environment that everyone can do incredibly well, that we are looking at the diversity that we have all around us. Because diversity encourages growth. Diversity encourages success. And by having many varied perspectives, there is better learning, there's better outcomes, and the quality of thinking improves. But in order to do that, we come back to where I started. Recognition that talent does not come in one package. Recognition that asking people to fit a culture doesn't allow them to contribute to the culture. doesn't allow them to enrich the culture, because all we're trying to do is put a mask on them so that they fit. And that is not good enough in our leadership. And that is not good enough for UK education. We must allow people to be their authentic selves, and we must give them the space where they can be their authentic selves. Because in being next to each other and being around each other, having conversation with each other and really enriching each other, that's when learning happens. In being in this forum and listening to someone going through their NPQH, explaining the methodology that they use and the systems that they applied in their schools, that's where we start to think, would this apply in my own school? How would I allow it to change? In looking at a panel of people, we need to make sure that there are diverse perspectives. In looking at a pool of people that we're going to choose from in order to hire, we need to ensure that we have a diverse pool. And if we don't get it the first time, we go back. We have to have the courage to say, I didn't get a diverse pool. I am going to advertise differently. I'm going to recruit differently. I am going to change what we are doing, because what we are doing aren't attracting the variety and diversity of people that I know would flourish in this school. And that's what we do. And that's what I do. When I moved into the independent sector, you can imagine I was probably within the independent sector, in the prep school sector, I was one of the very few Black female head teachers. At a point, I thought I was the only Black female head teacher that is currently in the sector. I've attended conferences, and again, I've been the only Black female that is present at the conference. And I'm speaking about conferences that have 250 head teachers at them. If I were to challenge every single governing body and trustee about why that is, if I were to challenge every school about why that is, they're probably going to say, well, we put an ad out, nobody applied. And then you ask them, so what did you do about that? And I think that's the part that we don't really consider. That's the part that I'm lucky that this governing body, who I work for, they did consider. And they went back and changed their recruitment, and we looked at it again. And that's what I do. When I'm recruiting teachers or leaders into my school, if we don't get a diverse pool, we go back and we look again. Because it might not be that I need to advertise in the TES. It might be that I need to advertise in the churches. It might mean that I need to advertise in the community halls. I even advertise with my parent body. And I tell them, if you know someone who's really great, send them our way, because I want the best teachers possible from a diverse pool for your children. And that allows diversity to grow, not an instant, but it grows eventually. And then it becomes a part of the inclusion culture that goes across the school. So it's not just about hiring one person, it's about how do we get others. When we think about cultivation of leaders, we normally go, right, so we've got all these people, we're going to send this group to do their NPQH or their NPQSL. And when they've done that, we'll know that they have a good understanding. Let's go to harvest. Let's bring leaders in. And that's good. Sort of good. If we are thinking about growing diversity and harnessing the strength of it, we need to find new ways to find our leaders. And that means we go out hunting for them. And that happens through networks. So if you're only advertising in exactly the same place and you're getting exactly the same people, change your strategy. Send an email to BayMed and say, can you possibly put this out into your network? Go onto Twitter and say, hey, EduTwitter, who's out there, who's thinking about a job, come work for us. Go fishing. Find the people who have the skills that you want and get into conversation with them. And sometimes go trolling, just spread your net really wide. In my school, we no longer restrict our recruitment to just when someone announces that they're leaving. I'm always aiming to have one teacher in spare, which means I always aim to have a moment where I am recruiting when everybody else isn't quite recruiting, because I want to catch people at the point when they're thinking about change so that they can come see us. And it's the same with recruiting leaders. We cannot continue to simply look for leaders in the same spaces. We must go out and hunt for them. We need to fish for them. We need to troll for them. We need to join new networks. We need to make ourselves uncomfortable. We need to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. I'm sure everyone knows that old adage. And in doing so, it's not just us as the leaders and as the senior leaders of that school, but our governing bodies, the ones who hold the power of recruitment, are the ones who need to fully understand the importance of diversity in recruiting leaders. If it weren't for someone willing to take a chance, because let's face it, if you watch my CV, it pretty much says, went to an all boys primary school, went to an all girls school, secondary school, went to University of the West Indies, which isn't particularly well known, moved to the UK, started teaching in a secondary school, moved over into primary practice, started leading in a primary school, and now is leading in a primary school in the independent sector. I am not someone that you would pick, because I don't have that straight ladder of progression that has occurred. I'm not an academic. I find academic study in the UK challenging. I do lots of reading. I have lots of understanding, but if you ask me to write that in an academic sense, probably not going to get much out of me. So I depend on lots of others to review on my behalf. Does that sound like the leader you want running your school? But when it comes to understanding the cultural contribution that every single student, every single member of staff, and developing them and making sure that they're in the right environment where they can grow and flourish, I'm your woman. If it comes to finding people and understanding the issues that they have and trying to help them do the best that they possibly can, I'm your woman. But will that come out if you have that same old traditional sense of recruitment, the same old questions, the same old prioritizing tasks, where you're trying to make me fit into the culture as opposed to contribute to it? So don't live in an echo chamber. Have the courage to listen to what I'm saying today, and have the courage to drive change through your environment. Look at how you can enhance it and enrich it so that it can become something even greater than what you ever imagined. Because if you exist in an echo chamber as a leader, you're not growing. And if you're not growing as a leader and you're not identifying what is yourself as a leader and your authentic self as a leader, then how are you going to grow others? How are you going to know when they need the support, and how are you going to encourage them to be authentic within themselves? So be authentic in your leadership. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It is not everything that we're expected to know. And in knowing ourselves really well, we will be able to help others around us, and they will appreciate that. And that's when true leadership occurs. Be courageous. Stand up for what you know to be right. Acknowledge all of the things that have occurred to you, and know what you deem to be of high value, and push that as a part of what you do. Acknowledge that with leadership comes emotion, whether it's negative ones of disappointment and anger and frustration, or really positive ones of celebration. Harness the emotions that you have. Be open to being emotional and understanding how you can utilize that and how that helps to shape the leader you are becoming, or the leader you are today, or the leaders that you are growing. Be aware that talent doesn't have a single packaging. So look for diversity, because biodiversity is necessary if we really want to have the best and the strongest garden that is able to flourish and grow incredibly well. Grow others around you, provide support when they need it, and listen widely. Don't exist in an echo chamber of just people who are very much like you. Don't exist in an echo chamber where there's just one person who's different. That's not really listening widely. Keep your ear to the ground. Know what's going on in education, and understand the many voices that present education to you. And don't just think, well, I know all about that already. Think of it from a different perspective. One challenge I always pose to schools are, well, okay, so you've written your policies. Who reviews your policies? What ethnicity are they? What's their wealth background? What's their religious background? Where's your access to the different voices of the people who have varied protected characteristics, who can actually look at your policy and say, have you thought about? And normally that leaves most schools stumped because they never had to think about that. They simply say, well, I have a policy, I've put a policy up, without having to think of the impact that would have for many others. So in closing, I'd like to say to all of you today, when you go forward within the leadership journey and you're listening to others and listening to all the participants who are sharing today, please make sure that you're also thinking, that's different, but that's the best thing that it could possibly be. When you're appreciating the work that they do, think, oh, that's excellent. That would make a great contribution to the culture of my school. Because inclusion is about giving everyone the space to be themselves, to bring their own color, their own life, their own vibrancy into the school environment. So it's up to you and all of us as leaders in order to make it okay to be different and make it okay for everyone to be authentic. So I thank you very much for your attention. And Lizana.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Alana. It's always very powerful and inspirational to listen to you. And there is so much food for thought. I couldn't write down all of it as far as you were speaking, but I had loads of comments in the chat asking if the recording will be shared, and my answer is yes. After the conference, we will make this available to you. Like me, make more notes. But any questions from colleagues in the virtual room? Now is a good opportunity to ask Alana loads of questions. And as people are just pondering, Alana, you might want to say something about the BayMed conference that will take place at the university on the 2nd of July.
Oh, yeah. Should I say that now, Lizana, via your prompt, or shall we go for questions? Okay, so if you do want that opportunity to know, I've said we have a lot of resources on our website. We are simply an email or a Twitter message away in order for you to get advice, help, and support. But even more, come and listen to the authentic voices, meet all of us, and let's network together so that we can strengthen education. BayMed was set up with the view that we want our colleagues who are racialized as white to have a space where they can talk about race as well. So it is for everyone, and we actively encourage participation from our colleagues who are white, racialized as whites, because having the space, the opportunity, and the understanding to network in that manner is so much more important, especially if you work within a school that is monocultural, and having that diversity and being able to generate and grow that biodiversity sometimes comes from partnering with the school, sometimes comes from having different leaders coming so you can visualize presence, sometimes comes from changing your curriculum at different elements of it so that it's expanded. But all of those things gets discussed within our conferences, and we highlight each one of them. It started with us looking at how do we move beyond unconscious bias, because there was a moment when everybody thought diversity training was going to be the great savior of us all. But we recognize that training without authenticity and training without action is meaningless and useless. So we're all about people who are at the moment for action. So if that is where you are, please do attend our conference, which is kindly being hosted by the University of Wolverhampton on the 2nd of July. And if tickets will be free, so we are more than happy to welcome all of you there.
Fantastic. And we also offer a wonderful lunch. So it's worth coming along. I have Gina Skinner, who's got her hand up. She has a question for you. And then there's also a question in the chat, which I'll follow I'll follow up after Gina's question.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Alana. I was absolutely riveted to all of your thoughts and your story, and what a story it is. I'm fascinated how you got from secondary, mainstream, maintained, to primary, independent. How did you cross those two divides? What was it? Was it the advertisement? What was it that made you apply in the first place?
So at the point, so when I talked about my point of redundancy, that was my last secondary post. So I went into that secondary post, and yeah, it was a school in chaos and we were turning it around. And as a part of that, my role was to do the primary secondary liaison and do a lot of work within primary schools. So in order to facilitate that, I visited a lot of primary schools. And I do have to say, as a secondary practitioner and coming straight into secondary, I had an image and a stereotype of what I thought happened at primary. Having to visit the schools and asking to see some of their lessons and see their classes, that vision, that image was shattered totally, because the quality of work that happened in that primary school, I thought, oh my goodness, we're wasting children's time in year 7 and 8. If I could go back and do science differently, how different would it be? So when I was made redundant, at that point, I said, I want to leave teaching. And I'd had enough. I was like, I don't see the point. You don't get any appreciation. Why should I stay somewhere where I don't feel like I'm valued? And a friend said to me, well, why don't you try, you liked primary. What do you think about that? At that point, and this is going to go to the power of networks, I was a part of the Future Leaders Network, the now defunct one. And I rang them up and I said, I don't know primaries who would take me. And they said, give us a couple of days. We will see if we can help you find one, because they also got a lot of ads. So they started speaking to head teachers and advocating on my behalf. And advocacy has played an important role in moving me from where I am and moving me into a school, because they found a head teacher who said, yeah, sure, tell her to come. She teaches science. She'll come and teach science and maths. And she'll have to do XYZ on our leadership scale. And that's how I ended up moving in and haven't moved back since. So it goes to the power of advocacy, having strong networks and having people who are willing to speak on your behalf. And I try to do that now with a lot of people. So if people tell me, I'm looking for my next leadership post, I'm like, really, where are you? What do you want to do? Let's see if I can help you get that, because I want to pay it forward.
Thank you. Excellent.
Thanks, Alana. And then I have Sean Starr, who asked a question in the chat about barriers. Sean, do you just want to ask Alana directly?
Absolutely. Could I say, really interesting presentation, Alana. My question is, what barriers, if any, did you encounter from the teaching profession when you started BAMED?
Oh gosh, I think from the teaching profession, right, so whenever you start to talk about race and racism, especially within an institutional sense, part of the pushback you get is, well, they're not the majority of the population, so therefore, why would they be represented? And there's a lot of talk about the pipeline and people not coming through, but not enough talk about the leakage in itself. So a lot of the pushback was about, well, there aren't people in the pipeline to become leaders, so therefore they're not going to become leaders, or people aren't interested in being leaders. They want to be in middle leadership where they enjoy being, or too many people are dropping out of the profession, so therefore not enough stay long enough to become leaders. Another part of it comes from the perception of how we talk about race. Now, there's this dialogue that occurs when we talk about race, racism, ethnicity, where people think it's win and lose, as opposed to everyone growing together. So we sort of had that pushback where people go, well, I would need to give up some of my power, what I have, or my advantages in order for someone else to get advantages over me. And we spend a disproportionate amount of time explaining to people that when we talk about equality and inclusion, it's not about someone losing out. It's not a win-lose game. It's about how we're ensuring that everyone has a fair chance and a fair opportunity. So I think that's part of the pushback that we've had. The vast majority, current pushback, of course, comes from the DFE, in the manner that they want us to discuss things in a very, I'm going to pretend to choose my words carefully, in a very structured and top-down approved manner, and not giving us the opportunity to allow the contributions from the sector itself. But I'd say by and large, at the grassroots level, it's very much accepting, it's very much wanting to make change happen, and it's very much active in making change happen. It's just now getting the upper tiers of education, i.e. the Department for Education, to recognize that. Sean, does that answer your question?
Thank you very much. It's a lovely answer. Indeed, thank you.
Thanks, Alana. Alana, I'm aware that, of course, you have played quite a bit of, well, you've played a big part in some of the policies as well that's been shaped by the DfE in terms of inclusion, and also, you know, in particular with the Bay Maid lanes on. Do you want to say something about that as well?
The role I've played in, I don't know if I want to claim too many of the policies.
But you've done quite a lot of review work, haven't you? And helped to shape the working.
We have. So we've done a lot of work around getting the Department for Education and getting different organizations to think about how they approach diversity, because what we don't want is everyone to suddenly say, we have to make everything diverse, and make a bold run towards something without a proper plan and strategy. So we have spoken to the DfE about how we review different elements. Now, I'm not going to say that they always listen. So for example, the new NPQs that came out, we had a review of them to look at them to see whether there were elements of ethnic bias. But part of our recommendations were that they needed to distinctly and very clearly include inclusion culture as a part of core learning, because nowhere in education, whether it's initial teacher training, middle leadership, and on any of the NPQs, do we explicitly learn around how to create an inclusion culture and how to encompass cultures and ethnicities that are not our own experiences. So we made those recommendations, and some of the providers are doing that work in order to ensure that there is that development going into the actual practice and the training. Similarly, I worked with the DfE on the character education development. So when we're looking at character education, we're moving away from this idea that there is only a specific culture and level that is appreciated, but that we're looking at, well, how can character be built from the ground experiences that students have? Because to live in the UK as a Black or Asian or minority ethnic racialized person, you will have to have some level of resilience, and that needs to be acknowledged because of the experience of racism. And they will have some level of, and looking at the levels of ambition they have and what they consider ambitious, and even the manner in which we interact within our community. So all of that came up as a part of the character education. Now, to date, the DfE still has a part of the development where they have the teacher diversity team, and that team does work in pushing forward policies and reviewing the policies that they put forward before they come out to public, to ensure that they do encompass and have thought about how teacher diversity and the pipeline, etc., how all of that works really well. And we do some core work with them to ensure that that continues and to hold them to account and to keep the pressure on. So sometimes it's not very pleasant meetings, but they're necessary meetings.
That's great. Thanks, Alana. And I think one of your favorite sayings, or might be one you've used in the past, which inspires me often, is don't get mad, get strategic.
Yeah, there's no point getting mad at them. There's no point being angry. That's just taking up emotional labor. Get strategic, get a group around you, get them to understand and show them how it works. They're very much evidence driven. So when you demonstrate how things work, you will get everything else to work. And to be quite honest, if you can get large multi-academy trusts, so say the Church of England schools have been doing a lot of work on developing diversity within the church itself, through their program From Lament to Action, and within their education. And they have gone forward without the support of the DfE, but they have been driving everything forward to make sure that it works. Find those people, harness the energy that they have and help them to grow. And in doing so, it will spread at a grassroots level. And we're going to push upwards so that we can change that institutional racism that is pushing downwards on us.
Lovely. Thanks, Alana. And then we have a question from Mamta in the chat. She's asking, I wonder how diverse the inspectorate in England is. Is there any information?
At the there is some level of information from it. They aren't particularly diverse, and you will find that throughout all of the overarching elements of education. So whether it's Ofsted, whether it's the Independent Schools Inspectorate, whether it's Ofqual, all of them lack diversity within themselves. Hence, when they start to talk about diversity, it's not from an authentic sense. And we have to recognize that one of the challenges when we say diversity as opposed to having an inclusion culture is that people start to prioritize which protected characteristic they're willing to work with. When we speak of diversity, the main winners are white females, because they will then go for gender balance. And with International Women's Day, yes, we do need to have that balance and we do need to develop it. But that needs to be a starting point to grow everyone else and to ensure that everyone else gets an equal chance. And we don't necessarily do that within those organizations. Mamta?
Thanks, Alana. That was really helpful and interesting. I suppose from my perspective, I am an inspector, but not in, and I'm particularly interested in how these issues are understood, how well they're understood at that level across the UK, and how well they engage with people like you or your network to increase their understanding, and whether you've seen greater engagement from the inspectorate to increase their understanding, because it affects lots of things. It affects curriculum, it affects workforce, it affects leadership, and of course there are all things that the inspectorate have a stake in.
Well, I'm going to speak truth to power on this one. We have had engagement from the inspectorate in terms of when we had our conference pre-COVID, they sent a representative who attended our conference and spoke about diversity and the way that they review it. But it was engagement to placate as opposed to engagement to act. So the engagement was very much about, this is what happens. We look at, and they picked off all the typical things. We looked at the exclusion rates, we looked at the inclusion grades, etc. And at no point did they look at themselves.
Okay, that's an interesting level. It's a starter, isn't it? But it really is only a start. I'd be really interested to connect with you over this, so I'll probably message you outside of it, if that's okay.
Absolutely, please do. And I encourage anyone here who doesn't want to ask a question publicly, please do connect with me and feel free to message me. Absolutely. Thank you, Mamta.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alana. And you might also want to say something about the coaching and mentoring we offer at BayMed, because I can see Julia's popped something in the chat. So you might want to mention that as well, how we can support people as allies in that way.
Absolutely. So alongside doing putting a research, having a database for research and hosting all the conferences and doing all the face-to-face work, we have, for anyone who is racialized as Black, Asian or minority ethnic heritage and works in the field of education or works as a teacher, we have mentoring that is available to them. So you are able to access 3 sessions of free coaching or mentoring that is going to allow you to progress at a specific point in your career. Now, for that, we have very well-trained mentors in a program that is put together by Lizana, and that training is to help them focus specifically on any issues that would look at racialization in terms of presence within education, so that you don't only just get coaching and mentoring to get you to the next stage, it also helps you to deal with any sort of racialized issues that you may have faced within your career. That is incredibly popular, and it is funded by the generosity of people, because we have a GoFundMe where people will put how much they think it's worth. It's free at point of use and point access, and we do encourage people from all ethnicities who feel that they have some capacity to do coaching and mentoring for someone to sign up and register so that they can access the training, and then we assign them to people so that they can have that opportunity to mentor and to coach others. So it works in both strands. If you feel like you have the capacity to be a coach, please do let us know. We're always on the hunt for more coaches so that we can help to retain more staff. And if you feel like I need some coaching or some mentoring, I'm in a rut, I don't know what to do next, or I've been through this experience and I need to know what I could possibly do, then, or I just need to have someone take those thoughts and help me clarify and thread them out, then please do register for coaching as well. And if you work for an organization or are connected to an organization that wants to sponsor some of our coaching, because even though it's free at point of use, we do believe that our coaches need to get some stipend as a valuation and a thank you for their time, then please do at least register to or give us a donation so that you can sponsor some of our coaching programs, which have been very successful, probably the most successful part of BayMed so far, in addition to everything else we get done.
Fantastic. Thanks, Alana. It's fair to say we coach on average. I think last year we had 185 people at the careers fair that we had to look after. So it's a really big operation. And if you can help to be a coach, we'd love to have you. And if you would like to be coached, let us know. But thank you so much for today. It's always inspirational to listen to you. I've listened to you so many times and I absolutely loved the gardener metaphor that you've used today. Always something new and refreshing and lots to think about. And I'm sure people will watch your talk back many times over. So thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me to participate and be a part of today. I have enjoyed spending some time and thinking through leadership again.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. And I'm now going to hand over to Amy Williams. You will notice Amy's in the room. I've seen her arrive. I'm glad you got home, Amy, safely. Fantastic. And I will make you co-host. And just as I do that, I just want to also send Matthew Moore's apologies. Matthew's unwell at the moment. And so he's unfortunately not able to talk to us today. But Amy's going to share with us her MPQH journey. So over to you. You're now co-host and you can share your screen if you wish to.
Brilliant, thank you. In the first instance, welcome everyone, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm really excited to share with you my journey through the MPQH. Not just the learning, but also obviously the impact that it's had on the students, in particular pupil premium students, but also in terms of myself, in terms of career progression, but also in terms of other members of staff and their professional growth as well. So I'm just going to share my screen now. You have to bear with me for a second. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see that.
Yes, perfectly.
Brilliant. Okay, so before I start, I just want for you to reflect on those teachers who have inspired you. And these are the members of staff. Members of staff are the ones you remember because they've been inspirational. They were the teachers who exuded passion for their subject, the ones who could make the impossible possible, the complicated easy, the ones who went that extra mile to ensure that you left the classroom feeling like you had learned something. And time again, when I relay this to colleagues or members of staff, it's lovely to see a twinkle in their eye, a smile, nodding, that sense of nostalgia of remembering that particular person who influenced you so much. And what you have there is a learning experience. And it's a learning experience that absolutely has lasted a lifetime. And this is what my vision was when I embarked on the MPQH, was to create learning experiences that would last a lifetime. Ooh, sorry. So good afternoon. Yes, I'm Amy Williams. I'm currently the Vice Principal at the King's Church of England Academy, and I'm Executive Lead of the neighbouring primary school, St Thomas's. Just a little bit about me before I go into my project. I'm an English teacher by trade. I've been teaching for 12 years. And in that time, I have naturally progressed through the school from head of department to head of faculty, assistant principal, and then finally my current role as vice principal. The journey I've been on in the metaphorical sense has been quite straightforward. It's been quite textbook. I've moved through the ranks periodically throughout the years. On a literal sense, perhaps a slightly more exhausting journey. Because you may notice from my accent that I'm not a Stokey, even though that's where I'm based. I'm a Welsh lass from Wrexham, and each day I do the 90-mile round trip, and takes up to 2 hours to get to Stoke and back, to go and serve the children of Kidsgrove. And day in, day out, so many people ask me, why do you do that journey every day? Surely there are schools in Wales on your doorstep that you could teach him. And my response to them is always the same. You've clearly not had the fortune to meet the children of Kidsgrove. You've clearly not had the fortune to teach them. Because if you had, you would understand why my moral compass always lies in this direction. Because for me, the children of Kidsgrove are special, incredibly special. They are humble, they are gracious, they have a genuine desire to achieve. And our children are not arrogant, nor do they take education for granted. They seize opportunities, and in time, they leave our school with the skill set, knowledge, and appreciation of the wider world, which prepares them for adulthood. And I'm sure if you share similar demographics to Kidsgrove, and I will share these with you in the moment, you'll understand my alliance to them and my allegiance. So why do I travel to the West Midlands every day? It's for the children of Kidsgrove, to serve them and to create those learning experiences that would last a lifetime. So just a little bit of context really about the school. Kidsgrove is in the bottom 2% in the country for deprivation. It's predominantly white working class. And on average, we have around about 48% pupil premium students. This image on the left here is what the school used to look like when it was a community school, which was administered by Staffordshire County Council. And in January 2015, this beautifully coloured custard flavoured school was knocked down, Old Clough Hall Technology School, and it became a Church of England voluntary aided school and renamed the Kings. Before this time, and this is quite important really to influence really my project, that numbers were falling at quite a dramatic rate. We were financially working at quite a big deficit. We'd been through 3 rounds of redundancies, and we were absolutely down to a skeleton staff. Had we not been taken over by the Church of England in that particular year, we would almost have definitely have closed. So there's a real sense of urgency and need for change for the children, for the staff, on so many different levels, in particular with policies and practices. When we did get rebuilt as King of England, the Diocese of Lichfield took us on, gave us and granted this beautiful building, which we're incredibly lucky to have. And the school is now part of a member of the Three Spires Trust. And you can see the data there as I picked up, or I embarked really on my MPQH, is the data is quite toxic, in particular for the pupil premium students. So there absolutely was a sense of, or need for urgency. So when we opened in 2016, as a new school, we still weren't out of the woods. We had 468 students on roll. Finances were still precarious, and we were competing with another high school in Kidsgrove. We needed to make a mark on the community. We couldn't offer fancy technologies, expensive sports initiatives, or enrichment opportunities. But what we could offer was innovation and vision. So as I was newly appointed assistant principal to the school, I knew I needed to make it so the culture and the ethos was centred around teaching and learning, that all stakeholders recognised that teaching and learning is the core business of school life, and that we would deliver an unwavering and strong focus on supporting our students with those learning experiences. The strategic area of teaching and learning would need to nurture exceptional professional development for staff. It would be informed by research. in order to reduce the variation in the quality of teaching and learning so that it would be consistently outstanding for all learners in all subjects. And I've just put on a piece here from Impact by Lomax. I was reading recently, and I think, you know, he captures there in those couple of quotes exactly what I've said about core business. Professional development is absolutely the responsibility of teacher, but also leaders. And teaching and learning is the one that's going to make the difference for all of our students, including the pupil premium. So every decision we would make from this point forward, every conversation that took place, needed to talk the language of teaching and learning. After all, that was what was going to make the difference. Up until this point in school, there'd been no clear teaching and learning model in place. There was no vision for teaching and learning. The end product of results had been more important than the process. And rather than nurturing and cultivating good teachers, investing in their practice, we were too busy reacting and putting out fires. So the first thing I needed to do was to create this vision, a vision that we would live and breathe by. And, you know, for those of you who are aware of the change models and the theory behind it, Cotter talks quite openly and candidly about a need for a vision, and this needs to ignite every idea that you have on your journey. And everything from this point forward, from meetings to documentation to conversations with all stakeholders, would be underpinned by this vision. And I've articulated it 3 or 4 times now. And my vision was to create those learning experiences to last a lifetime. So it really was down to the quality of teaching. And when I did some observations going into the school, going into different subject areas, at the time when I was doing observations, 45% of the staff were achieving good or better judgment. We have moved away from the Ofsted judgment now, but that's what it stood like a couple of years ago. And the feedback from staff and the feedback from students was probably the most powerful piece of evidence that I was able to collect, because there really appeared to be no sense of clarity as to what effective teaching and learning looked like, what it needed to look like. Staff were too ready to articulate that many initiatives had been put in place, but many or few had come to fruition. There's no consistency in their approaches, limited opportunities for training. And as a result of that, staff would try an initiative, they wouldn't execute it to an outstanding level, and immediately would discard it and see it as a tool that was broken, when actually it wasn't broken. It was a tool that, had it had the resources behind it and the time and the investment, would have come to fruition. So in order to deliver those learning experiences that would last a lifetime, I knew that we needed to tackle both the instructional and the content pedagogy. And if you're not familiar with those terms, instructional are those core pillars that we need in an everyday lesson that we know help and support learners to learn. And content pedagogy is encouraging staff to really know their subject, to understand the key skills and knowledge, and to know how best to teach a particular concept to a particular group of students. And those opportunities for staff to come together and to have those professional conversations were non-existent. So in the first instance, we pulled together the faculty leaders and we took a democratic approach. Certainly with teaching and learning, it needs to be something that's cultivated by everybody. And as the faculty leaders come together, we decided that the focus for the developments needed to fall under 4 key pillars. And those pillars for improvement were independence, feedback, challenge, and engagement. And every head of faculty would take responsibility of a development plan, which you can see in front of you, and they'd have those headings within this particular plan. Within each area, so independence, engagement, challenge, and feedback, there needed to be an agreed common approach, an agreed model which would be designed and implemented and continually evaluated. And the promise I made to staff when I shared this, or initially shared it with them, was I promised them that we would never weather vane from this model. This model is in place, and even when things become difficult, this model will not change. No pillars will be removed, no extra pillars will be put in. And I also told them that for the next 3 or 4 years, we will not include anything additional. This is our model, and we are going to support you in your teaching practice in each of these areas. So within time, you will be outstanding executioners. It would be implemented over time, and staff would be supported to execute it, but they needed to really understand the science behind it. And again, this is where evidence-informed practice has found it was seemed to be really important when we executed this particular model. So discussions with faculty leaders. If I just share with you what our teaching and learning model looks like, we've got it in 4 stages. So we've got this bottom layer here, which is the one in yellow. And this is about creating a positive school climate. This is based on strong relationships, which we know provide a bedrock for learning. Students need to feel a sense of safety and belonging. We know that in order for them to be able to flourish in the classroom. Behaviours and attitudes will be the concepts that drive ability and confidence. And that sense of achievement both from an ability to store and retrieve information comes from that nurtured and secured outstanding subject knowledge of the teacher. So during CPD sessions, we would encourage that content pedagogy for staff to have those professional conversations and talk about their subject. We encourage staff to do retrieval activities at the beginning and at the end of the lesson. So knowledge stuck, there was stickability, not just for what was done in the lesson previously, but in months before, in even a year before Key Stage 4. And obviously those effective behaviours were needed to be there in order to adapt and develop that learning. The middle, or the second section here, is the adaptive teaching. And this is our ability as teachers to customise learning so that it would address the unique needs of any individual pupil. It relies on the teacher being flexible at all times and at all levels. And in the moment of teaching, and that ability to be able to adjust short-term plans in line with data. And again, this comes back down to teachers' subject knowledge and encouraging those professional conversations so they feel confident to be able to go off with the children should it go in a different direction to what was planned. The third section is where is our core instructional strategies, and these were agreed that these would be the tools in our toolbox that we would hone for the next 4 or 5 years. We know, research-based and from my own pedagogical practice, that if these pillars are executed to an outstanding level, they will make a positive impact on student learning. So we've got modelling, we've got questioning, feedback, reading strategies, scaffolding and Kagan. And if you're not familiar with Kagan, that's a collaborative learning tool which you can encourage students to work together rather than in silo or in isolation. And then right at the top, we've got challenge. And challenge is the core of the growth mindset, because without it, students don't get the opportunities to take risks or learn to fail or be the best that they can be. And we encourage our students to fall down holes and for them to find a way of getting themselves out. Because this sense of progress, once they've managed to claw themselves out of this hole, is central to developing growth mindsets, to develop resilient students and to challenge them to come out of autopilot and out of their comfort zone. So when I put this model together, staff obviously were quite apprehensive because there seems to be a lot there that over the next couple of years they were going to have to develop. And it's reminding staff that they have these tools in their toolbox. They may use them unknowingly, but it's also shown them that this journey that we're going on together. And it was a learning journey for everybody. And by underpinning a lot of the model and the work that we did, I say we, it should be me really, that I did, was underpinned by science, and it was underpinned by research. And staff wanted to know the kind of the sterile facts of, well, how long will we have to develop modelling before we move on to another one? And how do I spin modelling while I'm still doing Kagan? And the answer to that was, I will change, or I will move when I feel you are ready. And not just you as a school, but you as a faculty, you as an individual as well. Because what I didn't want to do was to stifle those members of staff who were able in the classroom, who did use these on a day in, day out basis. Questioning, I didn't anticipate, but would take a year for us to really nail. And it wasn't because staff weren't very good at it at all. Questioning was something that we started with and staff really embraced. They really enjoyed the initiative. They really enjoyed looking at the science. And I suppose it's those quick wins as well. It's having those strategies and seeing it in motion and seeing it come to fruition within a lesson. And staff enjoyed the opportunity of being able to take risks and have a go at using these strategies, and being able to have, like I said, those professional conversations with colleagues of what went well and what hasn't. So the implementation, as you can imagine, was obviously more difficult or more time constraining than anything else. But in the first instance, and I've alluded to this, is about CPD and making sure that staff were well prepared, were well trained. And the first thing I did was rebranded CPD. And it sounds ridiculous and almost quite trivial, actually. But like I said, I wanted teaching and learning to be at the forefront of everyone's mind. I wanted them to have conversations around, oh, it's CPD Monday today, what are we doing? And it seems quite trivial, like I said, but actually it was changing the mindset. It was creating a culture that we had a label for something. It was rebranded. Within those CPD Mondays, when we were talking about these core instructional strategies, what I started doing was putting a handbook together. And within this handbook, each of the strategies, for example, questioning, would have the different concepts that staff might want to use. So, for example, no hands up. And what I do is create a one-page profile of the reasoning behind why no hands up is so effective, the benefits of it in the classroom, the benefits for students, the benefits for staff. But also, I detailed the script. And for those of you familiar with instructional coaching and that instructional practice, and this idea of having a script and making sure that staff know exactly what this script looks like, they execute that script so that we know the implementation is effective. And what we started to see quite quickly was that staff weren't discarding those tools in the toolbox anymore because they knew how to implement it effectively. They had the script. And for the first couple of months, yes, we encouraged them to follow that script word verbatim. But over time, they could then start making it their own when they had that confidence. So this handbook with the script is really quite important, actually, to moving and driving execution forward. And it also helped the faculty leaders as well when they were monitoring to go in and observe. From here and within the CPD sessions, once we'd started that process of looking at different areas of the core instructional strategies, we started thinking about what strategies we could use for questioning, for example. So over time, we've developed the no hands up approach. We've got the King's ABC model, which is where we're encouraging students to use STEM sentences to formulate their answers. We had the mighty might, so whenever forming questioning, rather than saying what could, what would, is how and how might, which would encourage those students to give or realise that there's more than one opportunity to give an answer, and there's different layers of answers to be explored. And then as a staff body, we decided what would the impact be if questioning was outstanding, if we used no hands up, if we used the King's ABC model, what would the impact be on the students? And we encouraged staff together to collate this, and it was a real powerful tool actually to witness, because at the end of the training session, we had a document there that had been pulled together by staff members, but it encouraged them, and it meant that they had to really engage with this particular instructional approach to be able to complete this document. So for me, that was my first milestone. That was my impact. It's had an impact on staff because they're able to articulate what it would look like if it was effective. And over time, I've put up the results again. There it is in stages from 2015 up to 2019. And you can see a real positive journey on the progress 8 figures, absolutely, in terms of the pupil premium students. And people ask me, you know, how can you be sure that it was teaching and learning that's had that impact on the results? And I can categorically say it's absolutely been the teaching and learning. When we go into classrooms now, children are able to talk the language of their subject. They're able to speak confidently. They're able to talk about misconceptions. When we question them, they're able to look for more than one interpretation, more than one answer. They understand and they see the benefit of feedback in the moment, of staff going round and giving that instant feedback and then being able to make those changes almost instantly. And also recognising the power of Kagan, of collaborative learning, of using those resources, those most valuable resources around you, your peers, to tease out answers. And that's come through in so many different ways. I mean, this is the end product, but the journey that we've been on, the conversations we've had with staff and students, is the most powerful piece of evidence that I can present with you today. So my whole project, my MPQH, was developing this teaching and learning model. And I want to share with you now the impact, or what the rest of my journey has looked like, because it hasn't stopped there. My year with the MPQH was absolutely phenomenal, and I had some brilliant mentors in Wolverhampton when I was doing the course, and been really nurtured and supported, and the journey has just kept going and going at pace now. So after my first year of sharing that model, over the last couple of years, we've been developing those core instructional strategies. Over time, the handbook has grown. So it's quite a Bible now, and you can see in this image here, there's a rack of booklets, and there they are in their glory. Just all the instructional strategies with lots of different concepts that are being described and shared with staff. And staff can come into this room, they can pick this document up. And for me, I don't want this document to be something that sits on a shelf and looks beautiful in a room. This document it's everywhere in our school. It's in the subject hub leaders' paper tray when they have line manager meetings, when they're having conversations with staff regarding professional growth or performance management. They're there at CPD sessions, on CPD Mondays. It's there during conversations with informally within departments. So it's making sure, and that was my endeavour, that anything I put into place wasn't something that was put on onto a shelf, that was stored away on the SharePoint. It was something that would be a working document, a live document. And as the model developed, you realise that actually this is a massive job and something that one person cannot do alone. So last year I developed the teaching and learning team and created teaching and learning experts. And through my time from doing observations and going around different classrooms, I've had the privilege, and I call it a privilege, to go into other people's classrooms and just observe them teach and inspire and absolutely create learning experiences that last a lifetime. And these members of staff in front of you have inspired me. And willingly, they took on the role of becoming an expert for each of my instructional pillars. And these this is a team that has been invested in. So I've spent time supporting them to become experts, to become coaches in their area, to provide one-to-one support for members of staff who would need training, who would need coaching in particular areas. These are the members of staff that can talk the talk. They know the research, they know the practice, they know current pedagogy. And they are the ones that staff are now directed to if they need support in a particular area. And we've also dedicated a teaching and learning room for these members of staff to coaching. So there's a member of room, it's at the heart of the school, so it is quite metaphorical. At the heart of the school is our teaching and learning room, where experts can go in with members of staff. They will have conversations. You can see it's quite a comfortable area. There's a whiteboard in there with projector where they can try out strategies in a safe environment. They can indulge in role play. They can practice their script in an area where they feel safe. And teaching and learning and observations are no longer something of threat. It's actually an area where staff willingly want to embrace and want to develop themselves. So over time, staff have seen the benefits of the model. There's a real sense of rigor, there's a structure, and more importantly, there's an impact in the classroom. And results over time have improved threefold, to where 82% of staff last year were meeting the King's standards. And like I said earlier, I've moved away from the Ofsted judgments, and now we're looking at meeting the King's expectations or not yet meeting them. And we've got 82% meeting the King's expectations, which is a real leap in terms of where we were 4 years ago. As a result, because the whole culture around teaching and learning has changed, and planning and developing oneself, last year I felt I was in the position to remove traditional performance management, and I've replaced it with professional growth. And this is a completely different perspective now, a whole new direction, which is designed to challenge thinking, is to promote that individual deep reflection, to encourage that collaboration and change for the better. So the policy for professional growth sets out the framework for a clear and consistent approach to the development of our staff and our expectations in terms of the high standards to which all teachers aspire to. This policy it's based on professional trust, and it's assumed, therefore, that unless the teachers or the evidence suggests otherwise, that all the teachers in our care have met the teaching standards, and now they are ready to engage with our teaching and learning model and really invest in it. So you can see in front of you there that our professional growth, we have 3 targets. We don't call them target 1, target 2, target 3. We call them the will to win. And the will to win area, or target if you like, is this idea of reducing the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students. We don't have empirical data now of making 84% of our students to hit their target grade, because we know that if we reduce the gap between advantaged and disadvantaged students, we will by default meet those targets. And the way that we will reduce that gap is by improving teaching and learning. So every member of staff's target is to identify an area on that model that they want to make outstanding. And then they will engage and they will indulge in personal CPD, but also within faculty hubs, but also with the experts as well. And there's a real impetus on staff finding the expert and them locating and arranging meetings to take place. Like I said, this whole professional growth is about personal reflection and personal indulgence. It's a process that's done with a member of staff and not to them. And that was really important. And it's almost become a strap line, really, for professional growth when we have those conversations. And then we've got the second passion to serve target. And this is all about content pedagogy and about giving staff that confidence within their subject area to be able to teach a particular concept, a key skill or key knowledge in the most effective way, and knowing how best to teach that particular skill or knowledge. So we encourage staff to create portfolios of where they've identified a pedagogical, for example, a pedagogical or maybe a concept that they needed to really nail how to teach it, and demonstrate that within students' work. And again, that would encourage staff to really think about the key skills and knowledge descriptors within their subject, and really understanding what it looks like to be a level 5 or a high achieving year 7 student. And then the final target, the freedom to succeed, which is an area of CPD that that they would want to indulge in, that interests them, or it could be a particular need of the school. So that's where we've developed, and this has gone viral now in the sense that because we've become part of a trust, I had the privilege of going into other schools and supporting with the implementation of this professional growth model into other schools within the trust. And it's got portability because it's worked really effective in the primary school and in a neighbouring high school as well. So it's been really powerful actually to see how this model has been able to manifest itself in different contexts with different students. And then I suppose the final part of my journey really, after or alongside the NPQH, is, like I said, we're part of the 3 Spies Trust, and the work that I've done that's been inspired by NPQ has been disseminated out to various schools. I've continued to work for Wolverhampton as a facilitator and assessor for the NPQH and the NPQSL, which has been brilliant. I've thoroughly enjoyed, I've really enjoyed this aspect of my own learning and empowering other members of staff to take on a project and to feel strong enough and equipped enough to be able to lead a project and make differences to students. Recently, with all the work that I have done with the NPQs, we've recently won the bid, our school, with the Church of England to develop the NPQSL and the NPQH in my own school, which has been phenomenal, being able to go from a journey of limited knowledge of leadership to now being the expert, to be the one now supporting other members of staff across the West Midlands. And then finally, I've got the logo there for St Thomas's, because obviously in 2019, I became the executive lead of the local primary school, and for the past 2 years have worked on a significant project in terms of school improvements, where we've last year received a good judgment with Ofsted, which was brilliant, and the hard work around teaching and learning and curriculum was recognised by Ofsted as being a real strength of the school and also of the trust as well. So that's me. Hope I haven't talked too long.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much, Amy. And it's such a powerful outline of your journey, and just to sort of almost go on the journey with you was really a wonderful experience. So thank you for that. I would like to invite colleagues to now contribute and to ask any questions if they have any. Any questions? I think we surprised them there. There's so much to think about, Amy. I loved the tree metaphor that you've used as well in your in your delivery. Alana used the gardener, and I was wondering, do you have a particular metaphor in your mind for your own leadership as a head teacher?
Wow, yeah. It sounds quite cliche, really. As a metaphor, as a leader, things are never straightforward. They're never smooth, and I suppose it's almost like riding the waves, and not necessarily on a vessel. It can feel like you're riding the waves on a peddler, because it's never smooth. Waves will come from all directions, and it's being ready to be able to pedal when you need to pedal, and be able to drive and galvanize through hard times, but also be able to lie back as well and acknowledge the work that you've done, and to bask in the sun in those moments. But you know, if nothing else, leadership, it's difficult, and I have found myself at times questioning, is this right for me? Because yeah, you can't please everybody, and I think the biggest learning curve for me is understanding people and knowing people, and recognizing not only their behaviors, but also reflecting on your own. And you do become incredibly reflective, you know, like, so even to the point where it can be quite damaging sometimes to be so reflective of your own practice, because you're trying to preempt reactions and behaviors.
It's a really interesting thought that you can sometimes reflect too much. But I just want to come back to the one point you were making about also celebrating success. Do you find that particularly difficult to do as a head teacher, or do you really sort of make a moment of that and really make a point of celebrating?
Celebrating success is something that we are incredibly vocal about in our school, and we do it in abundance with our children. In terms of celebrating success with staff, it's not to underestimate the power of the spoken word, and it can be very easy in the day-to-day runnings of a school to forget who the cogs are and the ones who are driving it forward. And it's not necessarily the leaders, it's the teachers. And speaking to members of staff, just having a word, dropping into a lesson, and dropping an email and saying that was a brilliant lesson I went into, or speaking to a member of staff at the end of the day is so powerful. And we can forget about it, but that's something that I do make a point of as a leader, is to have those conversations and to make everybody feel valued. And that comes from the leaders, but also teachers, support staff, even those members of staff who work in the kitchens and the canteens. They are all part of the school family. And, you know, yeah, you do have to remind yourself of that sometimes.
Fantastic. So that sort of real gratitude moments are really important. And yourself, do you find it difficult to celebrate success, or is that something that you tend to feel that you're happy to do?
Again, that's another, you know, when we're looking at self-reflection of our own behaviours. At the beginning, I was very quick to have a success, or not acknowledge a success and want more and want better. And over time, you realise that it is enough, you know, for our children. For me, it's difficult to celebrate that success and accept that success, because I suppose I worry, but I'll accept that as being the best it can be. So always looking for the next step, the next level, will always keep me driving forward. I'm getting better. I am getting better at success, but it is a learning journey.
It's almost as if we need to make a conscious effort of doing that, isn't it?
It does.
But it sounds like you're forever looking ahead and being strategic and planning and moving things on. I want to invite people from the floor to have an opportunity to ask questions. So anyone else would like to ask a question? I always have loads of questions, but it would be lovely to hear from you. I might just ask Alana. Alana, do you have any questions? You're a bit Dalek at the minute. You can't hear you. You just need to turn your sound on. Not quite. We'll give her a moment. Anyone else want to ask a question whilst Alana's managing the technical challenges? I'm just glad it's not just me having those. Anyone else? Okay. I think, Amy, you've been so detailed and thorough with your outline, and I absolutely loved the final, the penultimate slide, and they gave us that really nice mind map as well, or graphic to really outline things so clearly. Thank you so much for joining us today. Is there anything else you would like to leave us with in terms of a final thought?
No, just thank you very much for having me, and I wish you all the best in whatever journey that you're about to embark on.
Super, well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to thank Amy and Alana for presenting today and for sharing their leadership journeys with us. It's been a real privilege to listen to both of them, and it's great to feel inspired after such a wonderful, rich discussion on leadership. And you will be delighted to know tomorrow will be our final day of the conference. We've tried to give you small bite sizes rather than a big conference that would take a whole day. So tomorrow we have the wonderful Vivian Porridge from Women Aid, and we also have our very own Dr. Sean Starr talking about his leadership journey and his research in leadership, and also Dr. John Macklin from the University of East London, who will be talking about neurodiversity in leadership. So some really fascinating and interesting leaders sharing their journeys tomorrow, and we're really looking forward to welcoming you again to the event, and hopefully we will have loads of questions for them as well. So thank you again for joining us, and we're looking forward to seeing you next time.